Congresswoman, let me start with you. You heard Joe Biden's remarks today. I'm curious, do you believe he's right that the Democratic Party is still the Obama-Biden Democratic Party, or is he sounding like someone who's hoping it's still the Obama-Biden Democratic Party?
Okay, I'm from the Midwest, and I'm going to tell you that I told you for 3 years ago now, that President Trump could become president because he listened to people in the Midwest. He talked about economic issues. He talked about issues that mattered to working people. I'm going to tell you now, President Trump could win re-election if we don't nominate the right candidate. And I'm going to, Obama-Biden party, I think it's a party of working men and women that want somebody to care about them, that are going to talk about those issues that matter to families across this country.
It does seem as if, Congresswoman, that this issue, the specific debate about the personal space issue with the vice president, is more symbolic of this larger question. Is he 21st century enough for this Democratic Party? How would you answer that question?
Well, I think he's acknowledged that he had a problem. And I don't even call it a problem, that it got in people's space. And I think any person, man or woman, needs to tell somebody when they make them feel uncomfortable. I think the challenge right now on this particular subject is how do you address the Me Too movement and sexual harassment, which is very real, and Lord knows I experienced it in my career. But how do you make sure you respect people, don't get in their space, but we keep compassion? Joe Biden's strength is his ability to connect with people, the empathy that he has. He's gone through a lot of difficult things in his life, and he connects with people.
I want to play for you. He joked about it today, and not everybody was comfortable with him joking about it. Here, let me play the two pieces of sound where he joked about this issue of personal space.
I just want you to know I had permission to hug Lonnie. And you guys can sit in the edge, or I don't want you to have to stand all alone, but it's up to you. By the way, he gave me permission to touch him.
Was it too soon, Congresswoman?
You know, it was his first public event. I'm not going to judge him on it or not on it. The crowd reacted. You know, Joe Biden's Joe Biden. And if he runs for president, he's going to win because he is Joe Biden. He's got to respect people's space. He's got to understand that there are some people, and he's acknowledged it, that don't like it. But his strength is his empathy.
All right, I'm going to bring in the panel here a little bit. Geoff, what do you see here? How does he handle it?
You know, clearly his staff thought his attempts at humor today were a miscalculation because they had Joe Biden come out and speak to the press right after to do some cleanup work.
You feel as if we were told he wasn't going to talk to the press. So you do get the sense this was done for cleanup
absolutely,
purposes.
Absolutely. Yeah. But on the other side of this, I think Democrats, and not so much Democrats, but progressives, liberals, have to figure out, come to grips with what is an acceptable level of their own political fragility. Because whomever emerges as a Democratic nominee is going to go against a Donald Trump who has perfected the art of political shamelessness and who uses shamelessness in the public realm as a cudgel. And as evidence of that, we saw him today when he was asked by reporters on the South Lawn. The president was asked, was it appropriate for you to retweet that doctored video mocking Joe Biden? And the president said, people got a kick out of it. You know, he felt justified in doing that. And he's been able to use that, we've seen for these last 2 years, to his political benefit.
Let me play a piece of that gaggle, Leanne, and talk to you about it on the other side. Here it is. Number two, guys.
I made it clear that if I made anyone feel comfortable, I feel badly about that. That was never my intention, ever, ever, ever. I'm sorry I didn't understand more. I'm not sorry for any of my intentions. I'm not sorry for anything that I have ever done. I've never been disrespectful intentionally to a man or a woman.
And Leanne, I should bring up that both Lucy Flores, the original woman who came out, and she didn't like the joking, and she's already made it clear, and another person who came out didn't like it either.
Yeah, these women who have issues with this, for them, this joking was too soon. And you also have to look at the audience. This was an IBW union, probably mostly men who are in this audience, probably not the right place to make these jokes. But also, this is also not only an issue of the Me Too movement, because this is not sexual harassment or sexual assault, but this is also a generational issue. And this brings into focus, is Joe Biden too old to run for president in the Democratic Party at this point?
Well, I think you have to recognize that this is the flip side of his strengths.
Right.
Which is the ability to go into a fire station, get out of the car and go into a fire station and relate to people. And I think that's going to be, after the Clinton nomination, the fire station test is going to have to be a test that's applied in this circumstance.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
In that case, Joe Biden would pass the fire station.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to go, Congresswoman, and bring in his ideological back and forth that he had. I thought it was fascinating how he is trying to portray his ideology versus, frankly, what he views is what's being called progressive. Let me play for you something, and I'm curious what you think of it on the other side. Number 4, guys.
The traditional judgments of whether or not you were, quote, a liberal was whether or not what your positions on race were, on women, what your position on LGBT community, what your positions on civil liberties. I'll stack my record on those things against anybody who's ever run, who is running now, or who will run. I went into 65, 66, 67 races on the ground. I campaigned, I think, for virtually every one of the 41 people who won. Show me the really left wingers who beat a Republican. A Republican. So the idea the Democratic Party has sort of stood on its head, I don't get.
I thought he put the progressive left on notice, calling them left wingers, and basically saying, hey, AOC, that's nice that you beat a fellow Democrat. Your politics doesn't beat Republicans.
The issues that he mentioned in there have been important over the history of this country. We've got a lot of other issues, by the way. I mean, I'm for Medicare for all. I don't think anybody's going to call me left, but I'm co-chair of Medicare for all.
What does that mean, though? You want to scrap Obamacare?
I want universal health care. I think every American's got a right to quality, affordable health care.
Scrap Obamacare and do something else, or use Obamacare and build on it? Because that's a big difference between the two views on Medicare for all, for what it's worth.
I would like to go to universal health care and a single payer. I want to get there. The first universal health care was actually introduced in 1945, and we got Medicare 20 years later. You got to have that vision. But I'm also going to tell you that the environment's a critical issue, and how we talk about the issue. President Obama is the one that set the highest and most stringent CAFE standards that we had in the history of this country. But at the same time, you've got people that take CAFE again. It's back. How do you make sure that we're making more fuel-efficient vehicles but protecting jobs? There are a lot of those issues that are going to matter in the Midwest. And then you've got real issues like pensions and issues that matter to working people. It's complicated.
Geoff Bennett, I thought this was, ironically, the most important thing he said today. Because this was the first time he was pretty defined on drawing a line here. Like, guys, I'm not a progressive. You're not going to call me that. I'm not. Because I view, this is Biden. Biden was essential. I view progressive as some version of socialist Democrat. I'm not that.
Yeah. And he said, I'm an Obama-Biden Democrat, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
And
I think we're going to hear the words Obama-Biden Democrat from him over and over and over again. His first name may become Obama.
Oh, for sure.
It's former Vice President Obama-Biden.
And look, I wouldn't compare Donald Trump to Joe Biden in many ways, but in this way, I think they're similar. The Republicans who have baked in all of their views about Donald Trump and love him come what may, there are Democrats who feel that same way about Joe Biden and the Obama-Biden halcyon years. Mm-hmm. And so once we get past this dust-up with Joe Biden, I do think that he will, whenever he announces, will stay at the top of the pack because of those people who view him so favorably and have viewed him favorably.
And it's an important case here. When you have perceived weaknesses on the other ideological side, there are two reactions you can take. One of them is, let's get everything we always wanted, or let's build a coalition that includes a different group of people. Yeah. Those are different political tasks. Bill Clinton did the extension. Barack Obama, I think, extended and I don't think you can run a presidential campaign by saying we're going to get everything we want.
Yeah.
Joe Biden has run for president twice. He did not become the nominee twice. He's leading the pack right now because he's not in office. Of course, there's this nostalgia. I think he has a huge challenge once he officially jumps in the race to stay there, especially with this. There's so many fresh new candidates. But what might keep him at the top is the fractured component of this.
Congresswoman, you're a historian of the Democratic Party. You've lived the
Not
history of the
that
Democratic
old.
Party.
I'm a little seasoned, but I'm not old.
No, you've been a witness like me. I'm not. I was
Okay,
putting
all right.
we're putting us together here.
Okay.
In our lifetimes, okay. I'm going to give you the names of 3 Democrats who won the presidency and the last 3 who lost the presidency. And I want to ask you which one Joe Biden looks like. The last 3 successful presidential nominees on the Democratic side were Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter. And they were all the outsiders. They were all the first-time candidates when they ran. The last 3 nominees to lose were Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, and Al Gore. Very resume heavy. How does I look at this and I ask you, it's like Joe Biden looks a lot like the ones that didn't get there, while there's a whole lot of other candidates on this field that look a lot more like the Jimmy Carter model. What say you? What's the better place to be?
First of all, it's a lifetime between now and next year. And by the way, I don't have a candidate. I have 20 friends running for president. Let's be real about this.
Well, there are 22 running, so I'm going to do the math and figure out which 2 you're not friends with. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
No, I know. But the fact of the matter is that he may benefit a little from the Trump factor, which is, and we were just talking about it, is that his base is strong. And when you have that many candidates, you divide it up. The other fallacy I hear people say is he's too old. Well, Bernie did really well in the last election. We've got the young kids like Joe Biden. We're a democratic society represents all ages. I think he's going to appeal to go to our college campus. Some of the kids really like Joe Biden. Some of the kids really like Bernie Sanders. And some of the kids like Mayor Pete. Mayor Pete's doing really well right now. Is he a flash in the pan? So I think we've got to get through a summer, see where people are in the fall. That's the one thing when you're seasoned, not old, It's a lifetime in the next few months.
Well, that's for sure. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, Democrat from Michigan, always interesting to get your point of view on this. Thanks for doing this today. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.